Hey y'all, hope you're doing good today. So in today's message, I want to talk a little bit about narcissistic behaviors. And I normally try to keep the focus on us, trying to keep a positive mindset as we're going along this path on our healing journey, just looking inward, because it's always good to self-evaluate. You have to reach a certain stage of healing though, where I feel like you're capable of doing that, because when you live with or you're exposed routinely to somebody with a mental illness such as narcissism or psychopathy, sociopathy, things like that, you are made to believe that you're the problem. You're gaslit so much that you don't really know what's what. It's kind of like your judgment is just all skewed, and you don't even trust yourself, which is a tactic that they use for control, so that you are essentially dependent on them, because you have finally been conditioned enough for so long. This is what can happen, that you are just sort of like a lifeless puppet, and it just all the wind is out of your sails. It's kind of like you're just totally at their mercy, again, which is what they want. And it's really hard to wrap your head around, but essentially, I have a lot that I could share as far as what I have personally experienced and learned about and observed. And of course, I'm never going to be explicit and differentiate publicly, what's what in terms of the things that I've directly experienced myself versus what I've learned about or observed, just for privacy reasons. But I do think it's important to share some things, just as part of helping people to become aware of this mental illness that is, in my opinion, grossly underdiagnosed, because that's what it is, but also to validate some of the things maybe you've gone through, and you've already got out of this bad situation, just either instinctively because you just felt in your bones like it's toxic, or you just had some kind of prompting to flee, or whatever the reason is. It's good sometimes to have validation, like, oh, okay, that was such a bizarre behavior with this person, I couldn't make sense of it, but you've experienced that too. Wow, oh my goodness. So then it's kind of like validating, again, I just always encourage you to sit down in front of an experienced licensed therapist who truly has a good foundation as far as understanding the workings of someone with this kind of a mental illness, because it won't take a lot to share with them before they can validate that indeed you have been affected, by this other person's mental illness. Okay, so in my opinion, one of the largest hurdles to get over in your healing path is grief. And I don't feel like that's called out a lot for whatever reason, but I think it's something we all feel. It's just intense grief. Like, for example, even if you got out of a very toxic friendship or a relationship or marriage or whatever, and you were able to identify these behaviors that are on the narcissism spectrum in this person, maybe you've already processed that grief and you've gotten beyond that. But the problem here, it's a problem and a blessing, really, is that now you are starting to understand. You're starting to have a toolbox to operate with going forward, so you can identify these things. And when that happens, you can start to identify these behaviors in other people in your life. And so it's good in a way, because, well, it's good in a lot of ways, but one thing is, it explains a lot that maybe you were just confused about your whole life, potentially, if it was a family member, as an example. It explains why you can't, no matter how much effort you put into it, you cannot connect with certain people. It's almost like this stuff is just, I think it serves a lot of purposes for them, when they're playing these mind games, but also it creates a blockage, and you're literally unable to connect with these people. And so your whole life you may have been trying to connect with someone that you should rightfully so have a connection with, like a parent or a sibling, or a cousin, or a friend, that something felt off the whole time, whatever it is. But you just felt like it was different with them than it was with other family members or friends or whatever. It's kind of like with them, there was always something in the way, but you couldn't figure it out. This is the kind of stuff that answers that for you. But so the problem becomes, after that first leaving, that first toxic relationship, now you have the ability somewhat to identify these behaviors in others. Well, then now you're going to have to repeat that grieving process with others. And it just is what it is. And it's heavy. It's a heavy topic. It's hard. But, and again, this is why I don't really like to put anything out that has, depressing vibes whatsoever. But the truth is, I found it's better to just face reality and go ahead and say, you know what, this is really sad. Let me cry about it. Let me acknowledge that and validate myself and experience that emotion. God put those emotions inside of us for a reason, not to run from them. They're messengers, and they're meant to be acknowledged. And how do you acknowledge them? You feel them. It's when you feel, that's the acknowledgement of the message, right? That's my perspective anyway. So, okay. So I'm going to kind of briefly go over just some standard kind of patterning in these people. And I feel like, keep this in mind, I think there's a difference, well, I know there's a difference in someone who has a mental illness and they exhibit these behaviors towards you, which regardless, it's wrong. Across the board, it's wrong, but there's a difference in someone who does this just as a part of how they operate. Literally, they cannot operate normally. But maybe they look, they have this this facade and that fooled you for many years, and you noticed all the bizarre behaviors, but you brushed them off, right? And the thought of mental illness never crossed your mind. And so what you would do when these bizarre behaviors would pop up is you would either brush it off, or if it was something that was charged with a certain kind of energy, you might just take the blame yourself and say, well, I must have contributed to that, or made them feel that way, or I must have done something wrong. I don't know what it is, or whatever it is. So I'm talking especially like with a covert type, right? But sometimes these people, that's just literally so ingrained in their being, they don't know how to operate any other way. And then with other people, these same tactics are used, but they're used intentionally, and they have some kind of agenda. They have some kind of end goal that's usually dark, that benefits only them, that's very selfish, that could be related to intentions for your demise, even to varying degrees. So these are, very sick and twisted people. But either way, when you're experiencing these bizarre behaviors, it affects you either way. You know what I mean? All right. So some people in your life, it may end with a mental illness and that's it. And then with other people in your life, there may be hidden plots behind it, and you don't know. That's the thing, is you don't know, right? But there are signs if you look for those. So let's start by talking about romantic relationships, okay, or marriages, things like that. So typically, when you educate yourself on this topic, there's stages that have kind of been identified across the board. The love bomb stage, whatever it is to draw you in, right? But I just want to say, you might experience that drawing in stage differently than someone else. So the fallacy with regards to terms is that if you don't resonate with the term love bomb, you might dismiss the whole idea that this person, is toxic altogether, when in reality they are. It's just that you didn't experience that drawing in stage as a love bomb. Maybe you experienced it as kind of intrigue, maybe they weren't over the top at first. Maybe they pitched some kind of position as being in a place of need. knowing that that would play on your empathy to draw you in. So there's all kind of different ways you can be drawn in. So I like to call the first stage as being drawn in, whatever it takes. If they're very strategic and smart, they can draw you in different ways. It's just strategic. It's a strategic drawing in stage. The second stage in a romantic relationship is one of testing. This can be where you think things are going good, you're dating, and then all of a sudden they make really inappropriate comments that are very hurtful. And it's strange because it's again, it's almost like they all operate with these same tactics. So once you're able to see them, that's your toolkit you're operating with going forward, see? So it's strange because it's across the board. You can even look back throughout your history and people you've known, and you can start to identify behaviors there too. And that's why I say, I think that this kind of stuff, yes, it's a spectrum. And again, I just want to put this out there. Nobody's perfect, but there's a difference in people who are healthy with regards to this stuff. Like, they don't use tactics or play games. Healthy people don't do that, you know? But then you have the unhealthy people who do, for varying reasons. But the second stage is where they'll just kind of test you with inappropriate comments, you know. How do you react? Are you on board with something that's very unethical, or does that offend you? If it offends you, then the other test as a part of it is, well, how bad does that offend you? How tolerant are you of certain kind of treatment? You know, just all kind of stuff like that. During the testing stage, they can break up with you and then reapproach you and draw you back in, and then break up with you again, and then reapproach you again and draw you back in, and just over and over and over, right? So again, this is just checking your tolerance. You might start to notice some odd things if you are paying attention during this time, okay? Such as statements like, you know, if you're starting to get closer in the relationship, they might be like, I just don't know if you're going to be okay going forward with all the time I need alone. And you're thinking, I like time alone too. I love to paint and jog and read, and you know, I'm all about that. So I'm not sure why you'd worry about that. But what you don't realize is they literally mean you're filling a role and the relationship is largely empty because they're busy, which we'll talk about later. Okay. After there's any kind of a commitment, typically, they don't really care so much about your affection. So that can be part of the love bomb during the dating phase, is that they pretend like they actually want your affection when they don't. They don't want to be close to anybody, right? They can't. That's my perception, is they're unable, incapable of being truly, genuinely close to somebody. But they'll pretend, and then once they have you, they've got you where they want you, so to speak, then your affection's a put off. And the other thing is any kind of excitement, you know, which is natural, like, you know, an expression of the chemistry and just wanting to, for example, meet them at the door when they come home from work and just throw your arms around them. That's going to be very off-putting. Like, oh my gosh, just let me get in the door, and just, you know, it's not normal. As the odd behavior increases, you may have some questions, right? Which is natural. And you may be met with even more bizarre behavior instead of what you expect. So, let me give you an example. In a normal relationship, when there's a concern, when there's a conflict of each person's perception as to, you know, what's appropriate in a relationship or a marriage, right? When there seems to be like there's just a conflict there. A healthy relationship, there will be a conversation, right? There will be cooperation, consideration, and there'd certainly be great communication. Okay. So one way that these people can maintain their power and their position of control and power over you is that when you approach them with something, instead of even getting into the conversation and being a willing participant in the communication, they can just immediately shut down, which later you may learn that there's a term for this. It's called stonewalling. And it's in books like the 48 Laws of Power, which is positioned in a way to like help make you aware of this kind of stuff as a defense. But see, that book and this knowledge can be exploited, right? So don't be surprised if you you find that, you know, this person with all this bizarre behavior is, you know, has that book. But they can, they'll just shut down. It's kind of like, well, if I don't even engage in communication with you, then, you know, then we can't make any progress. And so I can do whatever I want to do. I don't have to consider your feelings. And instead of just shutting down, because sometimes that'll set a person off, you know, like, are you not even going to talk to me? Sometimes that can set a person off. But what they can do is they can pacify you by saying things like, let me think about it. And then they can just sit there literally for hours, and you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting for just a simple, like, what's your initial thought or whatever it is, and you're waiting and you're like, I've never experienced anything like this in my life. And then you check back in, like, do you have any thoughts at all? And it's been 20 minutes and they're like, I'm still thinking. And so there's different tactics where they try to position themselves as blameless, you know, like, how can you be mad at me? I'm just thinking about it. But really, you're never going to get an answer. And because you'll never get an answer, if this happens time and again, essentially they get to do whatever they want to do, and you are conditioned to learn that it's going to be their way. There is no cooperation in a relationship like that. So yeah. And then what does that do? That can create where you react. And then who's the bad person? Who's painted to be the bad person? You know, you are, but you're just like, I just want somebody to talk with me. You know, it's just so. But if communication is impeded, right, or prevented, prohibited, whatever, then either I think the term here would be dissolution. I wrote that down, and or conflict is inevitable. There, you know, dissolution meaning it's just either the relationship's gonna not work, it's gonna, you know, fall apart, because communication's essential, or there's going to be some big conflict, right? Yeah. And so you have one person that actually wants to fight for, technically, the relationship, right? To get into the conversation, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's kind of, you know, has that energy of a conflict. You have one person willing to do that because the relationship means something. And then you have someone who's not willing to do it. They'll just decide they're going to take a nap right when, you know, there's a really important conversation that needs to be had, or whatever it is. So they'll suddenly have something they need to do in the other room, or whatever it is. Excuses, right? So there's essentially a refusal to respond. And so, you know, you learn, and we'll talk about a few more tactics, but you'll learn that's what these things are. These are not only bizarre behaviors, because in the moment you're like, that's really strange, but they are actually tactics. And you're like, that would have never crossed your mind. There shouldn't be a tactic, you know, and strategy in what you believe to be an open and honest and genuine and loving relationship. That kind of stuff it's not real then. It's not what you thought it was then. That's what it means. But they employ tactics to maintain power and control, right? So yeah, and then as time goes on, you know, with these people, your attempts at communication seem to be repeatedly shut down, or they'll just give you breadcrumbs, things like that. And in the end, you're conditioned to be compliant and go along with everything, right? And so if, let's say you push the issue of the stonewalling, the way that this can evolve or morph to make sure that they remain in a position of making sure they get their way is that they can start to kind of soften up with you. And it's and again, this is kind of more with a covert, you know, with an overtly controlling person, you're going to see the teeth. It's going to be the energy coming from them, like a dinosaur charging, you know what I'm saying? And you're just like, you don't really doubt it. It's just, again, overtly controlling this negative power, coming at you. But with the covert type, it's let me think about it for an hour, and then you never get a response, and then again, if you push it, it doesn't work or whatever. Over time it will evolve, and then how it can evolve is they can come to you, with what they want, which they're going to get what they want, right? And they're going to say, look, I really want your input on this. I just really need your opinion about this. I really care. I do. I really, really care about how you feel about this. And you're thinking, oh, okay, see. And then as they present whatever it is, you're thinking, I'm not sure how that's going to work, or I don't think that's the best idea, or where'd you come up with that? Or why would you, again, it's bizarre. It's something, there's something you don't know. There's pieces that are kept from you, right? There's always deception woven throughout all these kind of relationships. And so as you're trying to figure it out, you're going to experience things like this to make sure, again, that they remain the one to ultimately make the decision and stay in control and get what they want. They're going to confuse you as they're explaining. They're going to go around in circles and say things that don't make sense. So you're genuinely, because they want your input, right? Wink, wink. You're genuinely trying to process what they're saying, but you can't. You find over and over and over that you can't process what they're saying because it doesn't make sense. And so you question yourself. You're like, what's wrong with my cognition? Is my mind not working right? But say you don't have this problem with other people. And then you also can observe they don't talk this way with other people. They talk normal and straightforward. It's real clear and easy to understand. But with you, it's muddy and foggy and strange. Okay. So they create this with you so they confuse you. Because how can you give any input if you don't even understand what they're presenting to you? Because then they'll be like, it's okay, I'll just handle it. If it's not circular conversations, then it's, other tactics like gaslighting and things like that. Like, no, that's not what I said the other day. No, this is how I feel. So it's, that's what they do. They'll also apply pressure. I really need to know. We need to do this now. And it's like involving thousands of dollars or a huge life decision or whatever. And they're applying pressure to you. And so you feel guilty, like you're holding them up from, something that maybe you just don't understand. That's really important. You see how that works? And so at some point, what I call the numinous help arrives, right? And you discover that you literally witness things like stories changing. You start to wake up, okay? At some point there, I feel like the numinous element of this reality decides it's time. It's time for you to wake up and start to see what's really going on. And it's beautiful and it's a blessing, and yet it's hard. It's very, very hard. So you start to observe in the moment, in the present, at this time. And that's when you can catch their stories shifting and changing. Or just flat out deception. You start to identify that, right? But by this point, there's no point in going to them with it, because they'll just flat out deny it. Or gaslight you, tell you what you saw or heard wasn't true, or confuse the daylights out of you, or whatever it is, okay? Let me give you an example. You might start to notice, again, all this time they spend away from you, usually on the internet, right? But you'll notice when you walk in the room, they'll close down the browser windows real quick. And see, somebody who doesn't have anything to hide is not going to do that. That's just common sense, right? So you see that happen, and you just innocently, you're not even like mad or charged, but you're just like, hey, you don't have to, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. And they're like, well, you didn't interrupt. And you're like, well, I just saw you close down that browser window. And they're like, no, you didn't. So when they start telling you that you didn't see what you saw, things like that, those are huge red flags, right? And they'll just claim that they were looking at the weather, or another tactic they can do is to pretend like they have all these various interests, like in different hobbies and stuff, or buying certain big purchases where they have to do a lot of research to buy them. So they're always giving you excuses for why they have to be online so much. And yet, if they're just simply shopping for cars, you walk in the room, they shut the window down real quick, and they wouldn't do that. So you can kind of see it real clear, typically in hindsight, right? But they'll give you these excuses for what they're doing, and really they're on the internet doing something else, right? They're always shopping for something. They'll tell you they're always shopping for something, but yeah. So, but it just gives them an excuse to be online. So at this point, you know, this may be before you'd ever heard the term supply, right? You didn't even know what that was or anything. So let me just say this. If you could observe someone getting supply without you knowing, right, you would witness the same power plays on that person as what you went through when you didn't know what it was. Okay, they do the same stuff with other people. And it's very validating when you're able to see that, okay? And other people are not so tolerant as you are either, by the way. They get pretty mad sometimes. So, but you were just that. You were very tolerant, trusting, despite directly experiencing gaslighting and being pressured and stonewalling and everything. And it may have worked on you for a while, again, because you may have brushed it off or, you know, whatever. But as time goes on, they start to realize that you're waking up, okay? So, when this happens, things are not going to get better with you remaining with them, because you are seen as an increasing threat to them. And depending on their level of psychopathy, that could be dangerous for you, okay? Because it's essentially you've discovered a wolf in sheep's clothing is what you've done, okay? Especially if this person, again, there's a difference, I guess, in between someone who it doesn't feel like it's a difference towards you and you don't know the difference. See, that's where you have to err on the side of caution. But you know, there are these people who do this kind of stuff. These, you know, mess with you, mess with your mind and lie to you and pressure you and all this other stuff and work you. And the supply you give this person with the mental illness is simply, you know, an ego boost. And they have to have that like they need air to breathe. It's really strange, okay, and twisted. And then you have people who are like that, but they do these things on purpose, and then they have a double life going on, or they're hiding something, right? And you're just supposed to be distracted all the time to serve as their facade. So there's, you know, different, there's a difference there. But they don't, you know, they don't want to be exposed. And so you can be seen as a threat. Yeah. I put, and the very fact that you are continuing to try and make things work, right? If superficial things don't pacify you, then they may start to drive you away. Yeah. Because for a while, they'll do things with you like ticking boxes. Like, well, let me just take you out to eat, or let me buy you this gift, or let me write you this really nice card or whatever. And you're thinking, you're reading it and you're like, well, gosh, I certainly don't experience the relationship with you like you feel this way. I can't believe you. Did you write this? You know, stuff like that. Just ticking boxes. That's all it is. But eventually, when they see you're waking up, they'll try to drive you away sometimes, right? So, okay. I have a lot written down, y'all. I can laugh now because it's crazy. Yeah, and as far as driving you away, a couple of reasons. One, it keeps, if you're the one that leaves, it keeps them from looking like the bad guy, who, like, especially if you have family and children and stuff, and, you know, that prevents them from looking like the one who tore the family apart. And number two, they can exploit you leaving to everybody else they know, right? Which they manipulated you leaving, but they can exploit that so that they can play that victim card and hook other people in, you know, via their empathy that way, right? So remember that victimhood, that mask exploits others' empathy and can serve as the hook for their supply. Okay, so how would they drive you away? They can use tactics like intimidation, scare tactics, things that you can't really blame them for, but you experienced and it's not right, and it's they might hint at any affairs they're having, give you hints, anything to get you to leave, right? And yet when you leave, they can still try to extract supply from you after you leave. So what is supply? I'm going to share with you my definition. All right, what is supply? It's proof to them, it's proof to them that they can affect you, right? This is more on the side of the mental illness. And sometimes the people who are plotting and have nefarious plans, malignant plans for you, sometimes they can still, all of it has to be a mental illness regardless, you know what I mean, whether they have an end goal or not. But that's how I see supply. It's proof to a person who's poking at you, you know, it's proof to them, oh, I can affect that person, you know. If they can affect you, good or bad, positive or negative, then they feel important. It feeds their ego, right? And let's go ahead and transition now into talking about friends and family members that have these same kind of behaviors and traits that you can identify. It's the same thing with them as far as supply goes. If they can affect you, it feeds their ego, right? If they have a plan for you that you don't know about, or plans for their life that don't include you, and again, maybe they look at you and see dollar signs or whatever it is, then instead of it being a fuel or feed for their ego, it's more like distractions, okay? So smoke and mirrors, so you don't know what they're doing. So as far as supply, again, it's the same with friends and family members. So they'll make things confusing or difficult just to see you struggle, okay? Because they've affected you. They can stonewall or ignore you. They can pretend they don't hear you in a conversation, or that, like, oh, suddenly they have to check their phone or something, you know, that got their attention. They can pretend like they didn't hear what you just said. And then they can turn around hours later or the next day or whenever, and they can retell what you just said that they pretended like they didn't hear as their own story. Just to see, I think, if you'll call them out. They'll do it in your presence, or either to you or in your presence, to see if you'll call them out. Because if you call them out, see, just the fact that you felt like, oh my gosh, and you call it out, well, that must have bothered you enough for you to call it out. So that's supply. It's really bizarre, because again, they think they've affected you. This is the kind of stuff that is so bizarre. I think that one of the reasons that they get away with it is that you think it's so bizarre it can't be real. It must be your misperception. That's more logical. Even when you're in it, you're like, it's gotta be me. But it's, you know, and so once you wait, sometimes, you know, decades, and you can validate the stuff again with a therapist, and, you know, it's documented, there's like the same kind of tactics that all these people use, you realize it's not you. And yet when you try to tell someone that hasn't directly experienced it, they're now in the same boat that you used to be in, which is disbelief. And that acts as the fig leaves or the cloak for these people. That is the sheep's clothing for the wolves, is disbelief. They exploit disbelief. They know that this stuff is so hard to believe you won't believe it, right? Until you do. But then when you do, you can't get anybody else to believe it unless they see it or experience it for themselves, okay? So, again, how do you know it's not your misperception, depending on, you know, where you are in your walk? Because once you learn their tactics, they're predictable. Literally predictable. You can write it down in a private journal, and they're going to do it. Yeah. So normal, healthy people aren't that way. Again, normal, healthy people don't use tactics. You shouldn't be thinking that's really bizarre all the time when you're around a healthy person. So it's power plays. It's a game. There's people that operate from a game mindset. And it's, as far as I know, just as far as the mental illness piece of it, if it's not distractions and smoke and mirrors because they're leading a double life, then they're doing it to see how important they are. And it's constant. It's almost like the only way they know how to operate. They can't be normal, and because of that, they can't connect with you. And so you do have to, when you get into this realization, go through the grieving process. It's what, you know, I feel like Jesus was talking about in the Bible, where he's talking about let the dead bury the dead. They're not even engaged in reality in life. They're engaged in a game and trying to make you be a part of it. And it's off for you because you're not living that way. See, that's why it's so confusing. The reason some people can respond and call it out immediately and they don't get hooked in is because either they're also operating by playing the game and they know it. They're like, I know what you're doing or whatever, because I do it too. Or because they've been through it and they realize now, you know? So, on the receiving end of it. But But everything, right? And literally everything, they have to have the upper hand in their game, okay? Let me give you just a few examples of what this looks like, as far as bizarre behavior. They might rewrite the rules if you're sitting down playing a game, trying to have fun, just relaxing, chilling out, just spending some time together, hanging out, like playing chess or something. Then maybe if you're about to win, they see that, then they'll, you start to make a move and you say checkmate, they'll suddenly, I've experienced this one, I'll tell you this. It's a guy I dated very briefly. He decided he was just going to interject some new rules, and I'm like, yeah, that's some BS right there. You can tell. And so it's like, is it that important? Another thing they do as far as bizarre behavior, they'll tell you what you can see with your own eyes. You two might both be at an air show, for example, or at the movie theater, and you're watching the same movie together, and something comes up on the screen, and you're watching it and they're watching it, and they might be like, so what just happened is, not like a normal person, but like, can you believe that just happened? Because they know you saw it with them, you were together, but the person that has to have the upper hand is going to narrate what you can see for yourself, like you can't. And same thing like if you're at an air show, for example. Let's say you watched the show and there was this, one or two really big events, and it was just like, wow, it was really cool. So a few hours later, or next day or two, you might be on the phone with them, and they'll be like, so yeah, sometimes at air shows, they'll create this formation and they'll do this or that, and it's just really something to see, and they're talking to you like you weren't there. So it's trying to override reality, your reality, with their reality. It's bizarre. Again, it's very different, and you'll know, than recalling a shared experience with another healthy person. They'll reverse what you've shared with them as their advice to you. So you might be like, hey, I just found out the other day that I've got that tree in my yard that I love so much, and it's got some kind of fungus, or there's something wrong with it, and I don't really have a green thumb, so I've been researching, and here's what I found out you can do about it. And they're like, oh, okay, that's cool, that's great, hopefully it'll work. Okay, click, that's it, that conversation's over. Then the next day or two, they'll be like, hey, by the way, on that tree, here's what you can do. There's this product you can buy at this store, and you're listening to them tell you what you just told them that you found out that you could do for yourself. And they're advising you like they're the one that came up with a solution. Okay, you can see how this is not right. It's not healthy. It's very bizarre. But it's like they have to be in that position of power. They have to be the expert on everything. And so another thing they can do is they can repeat something that you shared with them, like an advice. Let's say they come to you with an issue, and you love this person, you care about them, again, family member, friend, spouse, whatever, and you give them your advice, okay, and they're like, okay, like, no big deal, yeah, okay, I'll think about that, thanks. And then the next day they can come home from work and they can be like, so-and-so just told me, like, oh my gosh, it was the best advice in the world, and they can repeat exactly what you said is coming from another person, like almost word for word, and it was like it was brand new information they got from that person. It's and this kind of stuff, each little thing doesn't affect you because you're not walking around fragile. You're walking around with a pretty good sense of self, and you consider yourself to be pretty healthy and all this stuff, so all these little things don't really bother you. But over time, this can affect your mind. This can erode your sense of reality, and therefore your life. It has a cumulative effect on your brain, especially if you're not exposed. And see, they try to cut you off sometimes from a lot of other people. They'll be like, oh, so-and-so did this and so-and-so did that, and can you believe this? And you're like, oh my gosh, they're involved in criminal activity, or oh my gosh. So you start to distance yourself from these people so that they become like your whole world. And when you don't have these other healthy connections to kind of balance out what you're being fed in your mind, then exposure to this kind of stuff truly can affect you, right? It's important stuff. So that's really triangulation, that last example I gave, where they can come home and be so over the top excited about advice that you just gave them the night before, but it came from another person, like you never even said it. That's triangulation, and it may or may not have happened. It may have been totally fabricated, right? I feel like if a person will lie about one thing, they'll lie about other things. So they either have that as a character trait or they don't, you know, to be deceptive. So if you have any fears or recurring nightmares or anything like that, if you share that with them, they're going to exploit that. They're going to remind you of it. They're going to try to trigger you, right? To see if that bothers you or creates anxiety or fear within you, right? And so let me pause here and relate this to a real life example, okay? Material, physical, literal thing. I started out by saying you initially learn these characteristics of this mental illness, you know, in this initial relationship that you wake up in, right? And once you leave that and you're trying to rebuild your life, you may be making progress, you know, just going down the track, and it is climbing a mountain, but it's worth it, you know, and so you're going along and you're getting by and everything's going good, you know, but because you now have this, these points in your mind, you along this path start to see these same characteristics in some people. Again, it's a spectrum, right? And the problem with that is, again, it's two-sided. It's like a two-sided sword. On one side, it's bad because once you start to identify this in another person, then you're going to start to focus on that, right? Kind of like whatever you focus on, it gets amplified, you know, in your mind. And so you may start to see more and more and more as you know what to look for. And then, but the good side is, you're like, that's why every time I'm around that person, I've been making progress. And then it's like, you know, 2 steps or 3 steps forward and 2 steps back when I'm around this person. But you were blaming yourself. Again, you thought there's something wrong with you, but once you can identify this stuff in this other person, that's helpful, because now you can start to distance yourself or put up boundaries or whatever with this person and continue making more progress on your path. But you still have these, you have grief to go through with every relationship that you, even if it's just distance, even if you don't totally cut them off, it's still a grieving process, I have found, because you know this person is limited in their connection, right? That was the missing piece for me, is that you're spinning your wheels. It's this whole experience of believing that connection is possible with some of these people who are mentally ill is essentially robbing you of the time that you could be investing in other people that are able to reciprocate a good connection with you. Because you need that. It doesn't mean you cut somebody off. Maybe you try to gently nudge them in the direction they can go to, you know, for help. In that agape love spirit, you know, from God, because we're supposed to love and pray for our enemies. So it's not like you're kicking them to the curb, but you understand that to preserve your own sanity, literally, because this is psychological abuse, you understand, to preserve your own sanity, and sometimes to preserve your life, you have to distance yourself or put up boundaries or leave, right? But yeah, so where am I at my notes? I know this is heavy, but I wanted to make a video about some, you know, some identifiable things here, because it is important. Another thing that's bizarre, since we're talking about bizarre behaviors, okay, you might be in a phase in a relationship, you know, even friendship, family member, whatever, where you are still giving them the benefit of the doubt, okay? You're still holding out hope that one day things are not going to be bizarre somehow anymore. So let's say that you're talking to them, right? And you're wanting to talk with them, but it's kind of like you're only talking to them, which is weird, because then you're like, am I that kind of person where I talk to people and at people instead of with people? Again, I always have these other healthy connections where you can compare and say, no, I'm not that kind of person. Over here, it's reciprocal. It flows. You know, it's like, you know. But over here, it's it turns into you talking at them because they have little to no input at all. It would be a black and white painting over here, whereas over here it's very colorful. You know what I mean? And so it's normal in the beginning of a connection for it to be kind of safely reserved between both parties, you know, kind of a sketching out. Y'all know I have art in my background, so it's like a sketching out, right? Which is the first phase of creating a painting anyway. So it is slow. It's meant to go slow. It's meant to be reserved. And so the reciprocation can kind of be a little bit off balance here and there, but it should still be happening. But then as it moves along, it should flow easier, right? And that's when it's very colorful and it fills your life, you know, for both people. But over here with these people, they're not able to do that, or they don't want to. So you'll notice they give you very little input. And during this time, they're just watching you. You get the vibe again, like they're looking at you while you're talking, but it's like they're watching you. And if you pay attention in the moment, sometimes you can catch what has been termed duper's delight, which is a little grin of, you know, plotting. And essentially, it's kind of like this egoic thing, I feel like, where they're thinking to themselves, I still have you snowed over. You still don't know this is a game. How stupid you must be. And in reality, no, you're just a genuine person, you know? A normal, healthy person doesn't, suspect bad intentions or in another person that they're friends with or family member or in a relationship with, you know. So it's kind of like the fact that you don't suspect them makes them think that they're smarter than you and they can have one over on you, and you can catch that in the way they're looking at you. It's in their eyes, or in this little duper's delight, right, grin they can get. It's bizarre. And once you notice these things, you're going to see this in different people. Hopefully it's not everybody you know. That's not my case, but maybe, you know, 2 or 3. So another thing is, as you're sharing, you get this creepy feeling like, oh no, I need to kind of pull back and not overshare, because they can be looking at you and getting real excited, like, yeah, is that right? Like, I'm just a sponge and I'm soaking all this up and I'm gonna put this in my game and just exploit the daylight side of all this. It's strange. It's not healthy. To me, it truly is. All these behaviors are extreme. They're indicators of an extreme mental illness. And also, to me, I'm afraid that this is something that is very much underdiagnosed and more common than we realize. That's my experience. Again, if you think everybody's this way, then, you know, no shame or blame or judgment. It's just, you know, maybe there's something that has happened in your life that has clouded your perception filter, and maybe you need to sit down with somebody and get that cleared out, right? Another thing with these people, bizarre behaviors. If there's something that brings you joy, they'll either break it, they'll hide it, they'll give it away, they'll mock it, whatever it is. They're going to stomp on it. They're going to rain on your parade. And I could give very specific examples of this, but honestly, I was going to say honest to God, but they're too sad to share. They really are. So online too, I think you need to be careful and reserve a lot for, you know, safety purposes. Just, you know, remain largely private. If you buy them gifts, I have witnessed this with 3 people, so I feel like it's pretty interesting. They can tell you exactly what they want, for example. And if you get it for them, then it's almost like they resent you. They view, if you're giving them something, they view that as, oh, now you're trying to put yourself, they're in the receiving position. Like that's not gonna work. So when you give them something, you'll notice a lot of times they either act very resentful, their energy changes towards you, and it could be a really nice gift. and it could be extremely in alignment with who they are and what they want, stuff like that. It doesn't matter. But the energy is going to change. If they say thank you, it's going to be through gritted teeth. They're going to shove it in the closet, and they may even go out the next week or two and repurchase the same thing for themselves, or something that's like 90 to 95% the same. And again, if it's a one-time thing, fine, whatever. But you're looking for repeated patterns, right? When using your discernment about who to spend your time with and who to invest in, right? Yeah, so it's strange. In a company example, this might look like this. Let's say, for example, you're in a position of management, and you like to do things, nice things for the staff members. And so let's say you go and you buy something for a holiday, just a small something, just to acknowledge it, and just to be like, hey, thank you for what you're doing, and I see you, and see what you're doing, and hope you enjoy this little token of appreciation or whatever for the company. Well, if there's another manager, they may try to come in, a week later. They're going to say thank you, or not at all, or say thank you for that you gave them through gritted teeth, or not at all. But they're going to come in a week or two later and say, hey, I have a really great idea on what to do about the holiday. I think I should, how much budget you think I ought to look at for buying, these little things and they're going to just try to redo what you did better. So everything's a competition, because everything in their mind is a power balance. You're either up here and they're down here, which that ain't gonna work, or they're up here. You don't think that way. A healthy person doesn't think in terms of competition, right? And I know you know this, but sometimes it's healing. It's just good to be validated and to hear, like, yeah, even if you did sit down with a therapist and their eyes were like this and their jaw hit the floor and they flat out validated you, it's still good sometimes on your path to be validated, right? So to wrap up, I got a couple more pages. But the key to your peace and freedom truly is to accept that these people are broken, that they have a mental illness. And even if you come to realize this and you try to help them, remember that they can exploit that too. They can exploit your help as a hook. And so in so doing, that can be the way they draw you back in. Yeah, I already talked about that part. Yeah, again, it's very good when you can identify that you don't have these issues with other people. They're going to actually show you the polar opposite of these behaviors, and give you that good example of good, strong, healthy mental state. And this keeps you grounded, right? And that's going to help with the effects that all this has had on you, the self-doubt, any kind of depression, any kind of anxiety. I'm thinking about how you feel charged. Sometimes these people can, before you have all the pieces of the puzzle, just being in their presence, you're being worked and you're not catching it. You can feel this amplification in your body. It's like the anxiety, the adrenaline, because your body is essentially being triggered into a fight or flight state. And so again, having balance with other mentally healthy people out here keeps you grounded. I'm thinking of like a grounding wire with regards to your, the power in your house, electricity. You're grounded, and so that kind of helps to calm your anxiety. Y'all know stress will kill you, so just please try to find not just activities, but people that are safe enough. Even if you're guarded, for a while or at first, that's fine, but try to find people that you don't experience these same dynamics with. That's really important to keep you grounded in reality and in peace, right? So, and I'll just reiterate or support that by saying, if when you're around these people, they're twisting your reality. And I truly believe if these were the only people in your life, you might clinically lose your mind. I truly believe that. So, yes. Those terms like gaslighting, triangulation, all that kind of stuff can help you to understand this stuff. And again, therapists are but only the ones who understand. Because if you got to be careful, because sometimes if you're working with a therapist that has a limited skill set, then they may misperceive through their lens, which doesn't have this piece of the puzzle, and think that it's you, and then you may be labeled as having some kind of issue when it's really these people in your life. And it's sad, because I think this happens, and that's really, really a bad thing. And so I hope this has been helpful, and I hope that you are able to find some professional help if you need it, to keep you balanced, and to validate the things you've been through. And just know that even though it's not often talked about, it's normal to grieve, especially if it's someone that is close in your life, such as a spouse or a parent, or both parents, or any family member you thought you were close to, or someone that you thought was your close friend for many years, but you just couldn't get ahead in life, and you just felt anxious around them, and you blamed yourself for feeling anxious around them, and really the whole time they're excelling, and you can now identify these things in that person, and you realize the whole time with these people has been a struggle. And you struggled willingly out of love, but you didn't identify it as such. It's that whole love is blind concept. You're struggling to try and make something work, and they're working against you. And so it's no wonder you're exhausted. No wonder you're not at peace. No wonder you have problems sleeping. And the other thing was sleeping. As part of some forms of abuse, some people can literally, and you can get this on camera too, if you have the ability, right? And you do so in the right way. But you might discover evidence that someone has, for sometimes a long time, been interrupting your sleep, and that can have long-lasting detrimental effects, including conditioning you to, when you go to sleep, you've learned to expect to be woken up so much that going to sleep itself can actually be a trigger. It's awful. So you try to lay down and rest, and you expect to be woke. So you're just like, So you truly have to. It's worth it. Even though it's hard, even though you're going to grieve, it's worth protecting yourself with boundaries in order for you to reset your mind and your body, all the conditioning, to do the rewiring, to do the work, to get healthy, because life is worth living. And there are people who won't treat you that way, and there are people who do want a connection with you, and who can do so, who are capable of doing so in a healthy way. I just want to say that. Sometimes we need to hear that. And I hope that this has been helpful for you. I hope it's been encouraging for you. I pulled some cards to share with you all. This is from a set called Buddha Doodles from Molly. I forget her name, the artist. I'll put it down here if I can find it. I bought these many years ago. But they're cute. A good rest is half the work. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So, once you're able to find a way to reset your sleeping patterns, if you did experience that kind of stuff, being kept from sleeping repetitively for many years, I've found, whether you're struggling with your weight, or thinking clearly, or healing, your body heals. I bet there's studies out there if you want to look for them, but your body, I know I've seen it in the past, does a lot of its healing when you're sleeping. And you have to be really sleeping, reaching those deep levels of sleep for all this to happen, to be rejuvenated. And so sleep is critical. And so again, I hope this has been helpful and encouraging and inspiring. I hope it got the wheels turning. I hope it was validating. I thank you so much for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'm really going to work. I'm at an hour. See what happens? See, I'm really going to work at trying to make shorter videos and bring those to you more frequently. It's just it's going to be some work for me to figure out how to do that, you know. But again, thanks so much. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.